and cluster role bindings, which is the default in the Kubernetes cluster. We have given the cluster admin role and cluster admin role binding, two files we have created. Here we can see this RBAC. So this is the API version. API version, there are multiple API versions are there. We will see that in the later sessions. Now we can see only the cluster role and cluster role binding. This is the default role which will created by the Kubernetes automatically. So we're not going to create anything this which will have the all the resources on cluster wide resources like nodes, pods, deployments, namespaces, API groups and all, verbs and all. So this will have all the access. So we have created simple role which will create list and get delete. We have given the name as cluster admin. So cluster role binding, we need to bind this cluster role to the role binding object, the help of role binding object. So we have the same as RBAC authorization API group, and kind is the name of the name of the cluster role binding which we are trying to bind the object, and name you can give as any name as per that must be unique, and subject which subject is especially for which go into your create either user or consist or some other. So which user account details we are going to create and user details, and here role reference we are going to create with the role. Okay, which role we are trying to create? We are the cluster role, and the name of the cluster role must match with the name of the role which we have created, that is cluster admin, the API group which we need to authorize that. So here we can say kind is the user or in the subject matter. So kind is a user or group or service account. So I am specifying the user only here, and your name is the name which we have created right in the cluster admin, that must match with the role which we have created. There's two things we need to observe, and the role reference we are going to create. So here there are multiple things are there, right? API version used by the RBAC, and the kind is especially for define the which we are going to bind object, metadata name of the binding object, what we are doing. So this is the name of the binding object, right? This is must be unique, you enter the cluster, and reference dot kind. So reference dot kind, this is nothing but the kind of role you are binding. So we are binding only the cluster role, right? So we are going with the cluster role, and subject dot kind. So subject dot kind which type of the subject, user group or service account, which we have explained, and the API group is authorization group. Once this is done, you can execute the commands, and I have given you the below commands. You can execute it with the help of create and get the cluster roles and role bindings, and check whether if you have access to these resources or with the help of authentication. That's all for quick session.